Okay, so today's guest is a longtime friend of mine, a childhood friend. I first met him when I was 3 years old. And basically, we went through all of our schooling together, elementary, middle, high school, and first year of university together. He is a former Fortune 500 executive, has lived on 5 continents, and recently launched a book. I think you'll find this discussion very interesting. Join me in welcoming my friend Christopher Williams.
Hello.
Hi, Christopher. So, welcome to the podcast. Very, very happy to have you on this podcast. Um, I want to start off with a question I'll ask you. So, talk about where you grew up and then tell us where you are right now before we start talking about your book. So, can you do that?
Absolutely. Well, thank you for having me on 1G and happy new year to you and your audience. I live in Utrecht, in Netherlands, and have lived here for the last 2.5 years. And to sort of go to the start of the story, I was born in Sierra Leone, as you've alluded to, and moved to the US in the early 90s to attend college. And after that, stayed in the US and built a career, initially in investment banking, and ultimately in the sports and lifestyle, fashion, and retail industries.
Yep.
I spent much of my career there, and in 2018, 2019, got to a point where I stopped and reconsidered what I was doing and decided to do something else going forward. And since then, I've been working independently, teaching, consulting, speaking, and as you said, working on a book we just launched this past November.
Yeah.
So my career is very different than it was, much of it. It's now mostly self-driven, but focused on one thing, which is helping to drive growth and transformation with clients, be they corporations or teams, business units, or individual leaders who are trying to break through into that next level of effectiveness. So that's what I do, and I do it from the Netherlands.
Fantastic. As I said, I think you're living my dream life, but very, very, very happy for you.
Thank
So,
you.
delving into your book, there are many things you could do, obviously, with the time you have. So, why did you decide to write a book?
Good. Now, that's a good question. I get that a lot. And I think the short answer is I started off at a young age, with great teachers who, taught me and made me enjoy writing. So I've always enjoyed writing. And then as I grew up in my career, especially as a strategist, I became really interested in connecting dots, which means that I had to be very aware of what was going on with clients. But also I took that outside of work into my personal life, always connecting dots, asking myself why. So that curiosity and all of that dot connecting helps me begin to make patterns, see patterns, describe them, talk about them, ask myself why, and ask other people why they happen. So all those elements have made me kind of an interesting sort of narrator, storyteller. And in 2018, when I decided to leave my last role, I wanted to discover, quite honestly, an operating model for the rest of my life. I was closing in on 50.
Yes.
Maybe at the time when people go through this midlife crisis, maybe that's what it was. And then I discovered this element and this notion of courage, which is
Yes.
purpose driven. And I ended up digging into it to find my own purpose. And my notes from all of that introspection is what I essentially built out into a bigger narrative that I thought other people could find useful. And that's what became the book Courage, which launched in November, just a few weeks ago.
Fantastic. Now, note for the audience, Christopher says he likes writing. Now, Christopher and I we competed in school pretty
What's
well.
the competition?
Yeah, exactly. So Christopher, not that it's not only he likes writing, he was very, very good at it. So I have been more of the numbers person, right? Which is why I decided to become an engineer by training. Christopher, in my mind, was always a phenomenal writer. And I remember having an aunt who taught both of us because we're in the same class. And she was completely enamored with Christopher's writing and never with mine.
Yeah, she's definitely one of my more memorable teachers. I mean, so much so that I acknowledge her in the book as well because a lot of that support was what helped me to get to the point of writing a book.
Yes, that's great. So, in talking about courage, obviously, I have started reading the book. I haven't finished it yet. And clearly, it's a topic that impacts every human being on earth, right? Because regardless of where you live, we all run into situations that require courage if you're going to make the right decision. So I know you've profiled a couple of people in the book. Can you maybe talk about maybe your top two or three people that you profiled in this book? Because obviously you put them there for a reason, and their lives must have had a huge impact on you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, in the book, one of the fundamental ideas that I try to drive, it's not just that something called courage exists, but more importantly, to give it some dimension beyond how we talk about it most of the time. And I think many times we misconstrue courage and bravery.
Yes.
And the big difference is that one is a little bit more impulsive, and I'm not taking away anything from either one of the notions.
Yeah.
But bravery can be impulsive. It can be driven by an adrenaline rush to do something. It could be, save the baby from the burning building, or
Sure.
rescue the dog from the water. Courage is it's a little bit more deliberative, and it has a few elements of a overarching goal, a possessive purpose that one has, and that you look at that purpose through the in the context of of fear and risk.
Yes.
But then, in spite of the fear and the risk, you make the deliberation and the calculation to actually move forward with action anyway. And I think those are the elements that build into courage. And and I say this just to understand why I picked those people that I picked to profile in the book. There are many others I could have picked. But I also wanted to make the point that courage is not a birthright. It is not something that only a few people have. And sometimes we present superheroes in comics or in movies, or even today the corporate superhero, the big, CEO of a
Yes.
company who seems like he does nothing wrong. And we make this thing very far removed from the lives of everyday people. And I think most people then don't see themselves as being courageous. And I wanted to break that notion down and bring that concept closer to all of us. So I'm very focused on the idea of everyday courageous heroes and everyday, people being courageous. So a
Sure.
couple of people I profiled. One of them was a boss, and essentially what I did in the book was have 7 profiles that match what I call 7 essential choices that lead to
Yes.
courage. And I use the word choices very intentionally because, again, I want us to have agency over this notion of courage. It's not luck. It's not a birthright. It's something that we can decide to nurture and
Sure.
grow, just like we can grow muscle with training. And I have one person representing these essential choices. And one of them is a former manager, a former boss from Nike. And I use him to represent the notion of defaulting to action.
Yes.
And it's a really important part of being courageous. You can't be courageous in your head. You have to ultimately make it come to life. And the way that you tell yourself and others that you're intentional and committed and resolved is by actually showing it.
Yes.
And he was one person who taught me more than anything else the idea that action really mattered. You could analyze, you could think, you could do all of those things. But if you don't act, and if you don't act in a timely manner,
Mm-hmm.
timely doesn't mean fast, it means acting at the right time.
Yes.
You can never really make the impact that you want. So he's one person, and he drove this idea of, action.
Yep.
And then the other one was, the idea of rejecting distracting voices.
Yes.
One of the biggest challenges to us being courageous is being fearful. But one of the big factors that maintains fear is how the environment reinforces that fear. And sometimes it's based on people around us who might be well meaning, well intentioned,
Yes.
but they say and do things that, elevate our fear versus help us manage it.
Yeah.
And so in that chapter, I focus on a great grandmother of mine
Yes.
who grew up, in the late 1800s, going into the 1900s, ultimately raising 5 boys as a single mother
Yeah.
in an environment where women didn't have that much clout in society. And she was asked several times to do things differently, as in go find a husband just so that you could raise your
Yeah.
boys. And she refused. And you can imagine if you transport to 100 years before
Sure.
today, how much pressure that must have been for someone like her.
Yeah.
And I use those simple examples to highlight this idea that being able to manage the perspectives of others, reject distracting voices, filter in the helpful voices, is an
Yes.
important part of building your courage. And it's not just one instant of being courageous, essentially. It's the seven choices, the seven scenarios that could happen to you, and how you manage through each one collectively helps you become more courageous.
Very good. Thank you. Thank you. Now, I also want to touch on a point you made. I believe it was at the book launch where you redefined what people call midlife crisis. Can you define that for our guests? Because it really changed my mindset and how I think about this stage
Yeah.
most people go through when they get to their, say, mid 40s to mid 50s. Can you tell our guests how you redefine that?
Yeah, no, it's an interesting one. I think the background to that is that we live in a world that has created structures, and these structures are there for a reason. They're there to create order so we can all interact with each other, and that's totally fine. But we've become so good at conforming with the structures that, much of the time, and everyone is in a different place, so you'll have to examine yourself.
Sure.
Much of the time, we are actually conforming more than we are enacting our own intentions.
Especially
And
in the corporate world, I would add.
especially in corporate world, these societal structures, these models, what you say when you say it, what you do when you do it, who you hang out with, who you're seeing, and it spills into our lives, where you live, what kind of car you drive, where you send the kids to school. It's a crazy thing, and it's just this sort of, it's almost like it's a script, and we're all sort of acting, and nobody's real because everyone's acting. And the reason why, so we go through that, but somewhere as all of that happens, we do begin to entertain some uneasiness and some doubt.
Sure.
And but the model is so strong that the model sometimes, smothers these elements of inquiry or challenge that we could pose to ourselves.
Exactly.
And we just sort of go back to what I call autopilot.
Yes.
And as I was researching the book, I read this book, which for me was just visceral at the very start of the process, by this palliative nurse in Australia who had said, after researching and working with her patients over 13 years, managing this end of life period for all of these patients, she kept asking them, what are you most regretful of?
Mm-hmm.
And they said, I wish I'd had the courage to do what I wanted to do with my life versus what was expected of me.
Yes.
I mean, so that's very stark. When people are at end of life, that's the one thing they remember. And it's
Yes.
a regret. And that regret is about lacking courage. So you put that in the bigger context. So as we get to this sort of late 30s, 40s, 50s, when the natural evolution of growth and learning is to see what's worked, what hasn't worked,
Yes.
what you're happy about, what you're not happy about, what you're regretful about, what you need to address. And when people start to go through that process, even then, the heavy hand of society comes in and tries to push you back into the mold. Say, how dare you start to rethink your life? You know,
Exactly.
and just to nail the point home, we make it funny. And we
Yes.
call it a midlife crisis. And it becomes a funny, he's going through midlife crisis. And it's a funny thing.
Sure.
And that's to sort of force you back into just stay in line.
Exactly.
And so I call it out that I didn't experience midlife crisis. I experienced midlife clarity. And I think that's really, really important for everybody to know. It's a natural thing to happen, and it's an important thing to happen. It's an opportunity for us at some point in our lives, with a lot of knowledge and experience, to course correct.
Yes.
And if you miss out on that opportunity, and it could mean different things to different people, and you
Sure.
keep on going, you could end up where Bronnie Ware's patients ended up, which
Yes.
is 2 weeks, 7 weeks or 7 months to your end of life. You're in this state of regret, not just about the things you didn't do, but the fact that you did never woke up and try to address them.
No, fantastic. And for me, I'll tell you, calling it midlife clarity, one of the things it really cleared up in my head was even working with children, starting to get them ready to think independently about their lives rather than going into a mold. Because if they
Mhm.
go into these molds, ultimately they're going to get to this point and they're going to be, oops, why am I doing this? I should be doing something else. So, one of the
Yes.
things Maya and I have been doing with the kids is making sure they understand, hey, think independently about your life and think about where you're going. Don't just follow the mold, because eventually you're going to be in a spot where you're very likely going to be very uncomfortable and unhappy. So you defining it that way did wonders for me. Thank you
Yeah,
for doing
absolutely.
that.
No, thank you. And that's
Thanks for listening to this podcast. Please remember to hit subscribe on YouTube or whatever platform you use so you can get new episodes as soon as they're published.
it's funny you say so because one of the questions I get all the time is, who's the book for? Because I wrote the book today. I sit on a few nonprofit boards, and I have a network of corporate board, directors, and they found the book interesting and exciting to read. And as have the portion of my network who are actively working in senior level roles in different companies, as have young people that I mentor either formally or informally who are
Yeah.
mid manager and are trying to make those decisions,
Yes.
as have friends of my friends who are young, teens or early 20s,
Sure.
So I did something which you're not supposed to do: write a book for everybody. You're supposed to like pick one. And my publisher's like, "What are you trying to do?" I'm like, "No, I'm going to go there." That's part of me just being crazy and courageous with this project. I know what I'm doing here. I'm going to speak to all of these layers of people in very different life stages.
Yes.
But the point I wanted to make, though, is because I'd experienced all of those stages, and I did want to accentuate this idea, which you just brought up very nicely, that it's not too early to start to think about your own independent emotional self. That's not to say you should not be a well-functioning member of society,
Sure.
but you should also understand that you have agency to step away from the notions that you don't agree with or which are not maybe in your best interest. And it's not too early to do that as a young person, and it's not too late to do that as a senior executive either. You have to get on that path. So that's why I think I like the idea, and I like when I hear people say young people have been interested in the book, because that's great, because I like that.
Okay.
I don't want them to find out when they're 50 that they've been in the wrong job and they've been focused on the wrong things. I want them to discover that earlier and make those
Fantastic.
calls.
And as you know, my daughter Kirsten did a speech at school on your book.
Yeah.
And one part she focused on was around, I think it was when you were working for Adidas, and this executive you were working with had an event that happened. So, for the benefit of my guests who probably who haven't read the book yet or may not get to read the book, can you describe the circumstances around that and how it shaped you in terms of getting you to start thinking of courage?
Yeah, I mean, I had been working, like I said earlier, for many large companies and been quite successful and enjoyed the work that I did. I don't have anything negative to say about any of the companies I worked for because they all give me so much. And it so happened that in this role, I had done really well and had a really good year, and then was given a challenge right after that. After I had a great year, been promoted, given another challenge. And turned out that new challenge was just horrible, and was maybe one of the worst experiences I've had. Not because the company was bad, but because I was working in an environment that was just toxic on many levels.
Yeah.
So I'm there trying to figure things out, working with other executives, and I'm beginning to realize that I'm taking this work quite seriously, and I'm burning the candle on both ends to just move the organization forward. And other people are just simplifying it down to their own narrow self-interest. So we misaligned.
Yes.
And that's when I started to wonder if I wanted to be working in these environments where clearly values are misaligned and goals are misaligned. And, what was the use of me taking time away from my family to go do all this work when the guys I'm working with, they're taking time from their family as well, but they have different goals in mind. Anyway.
Sure.
And then in the middle of that, one person in the team has this, major medical event. And at the time, we didn't know what was going on. The person could have passed away, but fortunately didn't.
Sure.
But at least it was a wake-up call for me to say, yep, that's it right there. You were thinking that this didn't make any sense. Now that's exactly what the problem is. You could essentially just keel over at your desk one day, and they'll drag you home and they'll leave you by your front door. And so, and that got me thinking, see, then what is the purpose of life then? Is it to work and be successful especially for large corporation, that I don't really stand to benefit particularly significantly from the work that I
Sure.
do. And you also realize that all the things that I wanted to do when I was young, and we talked about our childhood together, it's not like I was super rich or anything. That was not the point. But I
Sure.
had accomplished a lot of it. So then the question is, oh wow, do you then just keep upping the ante with new
Yes.
big sort of professional goals, or at some point you say, check, 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 and check. Now let me go do something else, and
Sure.
that something else could be something that is more, purposeful, more mission driven, that maybe brings you more peace, more joy, and that's why God. It was sort
Yes.
of looking back and looking around and saying, okay, the little success that I've had, how can I take the learnings from that and disseminate those learnings actively to other people, young people. We talked about different stages of
Yes.
people that I want to speak to. How can I go be engaging to them and help them navigate some of the things that I navigated? I might have done it easier, maybe because I was lucky, or maybe I had good mentors, but not everybody has good mentors or is lucky. So let me go be part of their own life in a positive way. And I found that, and I still find that more fulfilling and more enjoyable than those last 2 years in the corporate world where I was trying to, do more, and obviously was not feeling like I was adding a lot of value to society in general. So that was a big transition.
Yeah.
But yeah, it took that event of that person on the backs of this
Yes.
introspection that I had been doing to realize that no, this is not a joke. Anything can happen anytime, and I want to make sure that I'm on the right side or right path when it happens. Again, going back to this idea of regret,
Yes.
especially when you're making choices that are taking you away from your family and your loved ones.
Yes, and I have to say, Christopher, because I read that in the book, and then obviously, Kirsten, my daughter, did a speech on it, and I have to tell you, the way you relate that story was what I call classic Christopher. The Christopher I remember, from school
Right.
writing these beautiful essays, because
Yeah.
it's a very, very riveting part of the story, right? I think the way it was relayed, but also the seriousness of the event and the type of reflection it forces one into. So thank you for including that. I found that very, very helpful within the book.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that. Yeah, no, thank you for saying that. It was an important pivot point, and it was a very normal and ordinary one that many people might experience, but they just sort of live through. But I wanted to let people know that part of the story of the journey to courage is being self-aware and knowing when some things are happening. The way I talk
Sure.
about it is you should be listening and know when the universe is talking to you,
Yes.
because those opportunities, no one's going to get all the decisions just put in a nice gilded pillow and presented to you at the front door by the guy who came in with the stagecoach and his
Yes.
livery. You kind of have to listen to when things come to you in different ways. And for me, that was one of those points where I feel like the universe was saying something, and I felt like I needed to listen and
Fantastic.
act.
Fantastic. So as you know, this podcast is about helping people make the right financial decisions or financial decisions that support the life they hope to live, right? The life of their dreams.
Mhm.
So I want to ask a question, and that is, how do you think being maybe financially secure or making decisions that help you become financially secure? It could be over time, it doesn't have to be a snap decision.
Mhm.
How do you think those decisions help you make courageous decisions later on in life?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think it's quite complicated, and let me start with contrarian view, which I
Yes.
address way at the end of the book. You haven't got in there, but you'll get to it.
Sure.
Which is the idea that you can only be courageous when you are secure.
Yes.
And I was told that in different ways as I was doing the research, and I understood it 100%. I understand why people say that,
Yes.
but I also felt like I needed to disagree with it. Well, partly because I actually disagree with it, but I also
Uh-huh.
needed to make that point because, as you know, there's been lots of change in the world that we live in, and a lot of that change was driven by people who didn't have much,
Sure.
but they were in a situation where either the adversity they were facing was so dire, or the sense of purpose and passion that they had was so strong that that they had no option but to take on risk and take on fear, and in that process ultimately change the world. And many of these people were not wealthy people.
Sure.
So that happens.
Yes.
But that's again taken into this maybe grandiose sort of superpower level.
Sure.
In everyday life, I think that still happens, but I do understand going back to the structures that we all live in.
Yes.
And we all have to pay mortgages, we have to pay bills, we have healthcare, and so much of our time is spent at work. So work
Yes.
and income that we derive from work is a big part of our lives.
Yes.
So it's hard now to disconnect yourself from that, especially if it's walking away from a job you don't like, because
Sure.
if you don't have an alternative to support yourself, you might be in trouble. So absolutely, I understand that as well. You know, and I respect that. And I think when I say courage is a deliberative process, I think that's where this comes into play. So you don't just pack up, take your ball, and go home.
Yeah.
I think you have to be very thoughtful about where you are, and context matters. Everyone is in a different place, and so that deep consideration of all of these elements, of all of this risk, of whether or not you are financially stable, whether or
Yeah.
not you can change your situation, whether or not this is the right time, understanding
Yes.
what your responsibilities are, family, etc. All of those need to be part of the conversation.
Sure.
And I think it's right for you to postpone what could be the courageous action,
Sure.
even if you've made the decision. You can make the decision, but you're
Yes.
unable to pursue the action because you're not ready. And I think that's really
Yes.
fine. I think being in that state of self-awareness is a whole lot better than not being in any state of self-awareness. In that case, you're saying, okay, this person just biding their time.
Yes.
And that way now they can begin to organize their affairs to get to the point where they can actually act. And that's totally fine.
Excellent.
So that's one aspect. The other one, though, is to, going back to the question about, young people, is to really begin to understand that society and our structures and our responsibilities have a very strong influence over our lives.
Yes.
And it's really understanding at a very early age that while you appreciate and you understand and you respect that influence, you never let it consume you. You don't become a slave to it.
Yeah.
And for me, I didn't get to that point immediately, but I got there sooner than I think many.
Sure.
When I was an investment banker, I started off my career in investment banking at Lehman Brothers. And you're young, you get a $30,000 base salary. I mean, when you're 20 something, 21, 22, that's a lot of money.
Yes.
And then you get a sign-on bonus. I think it was about 15 grand. And then you had a guaranteed bonus of, I think, 70,000 the first
Sure.
year. So you're 21, 22, and you're like 115, 120, $30,000 your first year. And I remember there was this girl I used to hang out with who said one day, my dad's a college professor and you make more money than he. I was like, holy crap, that's crazy. I mean, he was like a guy in his 40s.
Yes.
And in my first year, I got an undergrad. And so the point I was making, that's kind of how I started. But the idea is that I went through maybe 4 or 5 years of investment banking and didn't save any money. I didn't do 401k. I don't need it. I'm young. Money's coming. So, ran up credit card debt to like $40,000, $50,000 twice, paid it down, ran it up again and paid it down. So that level of craziness. And, but I think after the second time of sort of this credit card cycles, I came to my senses. I think it was when I was trying to go to business school that,
Yes.
hey, you need to start saving.
Yeah.
And then I started. And I got into this zone which lasted throughout my career of always living way below my means.
Good.
So at a very early age, really started to think about putting money away. As soon as we had kids, we got them started on the 529. We fully funded it with good
Yes.
years of bonuses. So it was done to the side way, way, way long ago.
Sure.
And all those things. And it's not like I was crazy rich, but I was definitely intentionally living below my means.
Yes.
And that's real. You don't have to get a BMW, you don't have to get a Mercedes, you can get a Honda. You don't have to live in the nicest neighborhood in town and
Yes.
the big house on the corner lot. You can go somewhere else and it could be half the size and you still live. And we started to prioritize meaningful experiences as a family over meaningful things, that we enjoyed, but really didn't enhance our lives in any way.
Sure.
So the point I'm making is you can get to the point where you make a call,
Yes.
but you can't execute it. And then you do have to now orchestrate what that execution looks like and give yourself
Sure.
some time to do it.
Yes.
Or you can really start early and to make financial considerations or professional ones not be the things that tie you down. And I think
Fantastic.
the way our society is set up, one way you do so is by financial independence. You know,
Yes.
whether it's 6 months money, 1 year money, I would say like 3 year level money, so that you can course correct.
Yes.
And then the last part would be really getting comfortable with living within your means.
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
it's overrated what we do with ourselves about, living, that's what they say, trying to keep up with the Joneses
Yes.
and all of that stuff. It's so overrated. I can't even tell you how overrated that nonsense is. You
Yeah.
know,
I agree.
live within your means, and then put money to work in different ways that give you some flexibility.
No,
Yes.
Christopher, you've said a lot here. I don't even
Yeah.
know that
Sorry.
I can. No, no, no. Very, very good things. Very, very essential things. I mean, I don't even know that we have enough time to slice and dissect all of them. I would say on maybe what was your second point, which was working with young people. That for me, again, has been very interesting because as I read your book and I'm thinking and I'm reflecting, Kirsten giving a speech on your book, these are things we're talking to both kids about. Ma and I are talking to both kids about for them to start thinking about where they're going and making sure they have a level of independence, right? Because society forces you into a mold and you've got to make sure you're thinking ahead in it like a chess game, where is this game going? And making sure the outcomes are what you want. Otherwise, you start course correcting early. That's what we've done. And I think the book has been very great, in that respect. Just thinking where you're going, right?
Yeah.
Because to me, it's never too early to start thinking about this. So it's
Yeah.
it's been very, very helpful there. And I think and I hope a lot of people will find it useful not only for themselves, but also for their children.
Yeah.
Because it's all if you can start something right early, no need to do it wrong and then course correct.
Yeah.
No need to do it wrong and course correct. But very, very good. So
Yeah.
let's
But
let's
just
let's
quickly on that one, quickly on that,
yes,
I'm going to not take long. It's also a journey, and the journey is the exploration and making mistakes, because there will be some, but
sure.
giving yourself time to make the mistakes and course correct. And no one's going to have a perfect plan of their lives,
Yes.
but it's nice to have some aspiration, and it's nice to really get into the habit of connecting your aspiration coming to life and your responsibility to do something,
Great.
and to understand that you have that agency. And yeah,
Yes.
things might change, context might change, and you might swivel left or right. It's like a boat. It's anchored. It has that grounding because it knows where it needs to be,
Yes.
but it's not stationary on the
Start.
top, on the surface of the water.
Exactly.
I mean, it might be anchored here, but it might move 50 foot in one direction and 100 feet in another direction.
Sure.
It's not going to float down river because it's anchored. So
Yes.
in that way, you're sort of anchored in, an aspiration. And then you can change that. You can lift and drop the anchor somewhere else if you want, but you generally know where you are and you have that control. And then you kind of swivel and move and bob along based on how context is changing. And it's not perfection, but it's definitely an effort that you can make and
True.
should make.
Yes. No, no, no. Too. Very, very helpful. So I want to ask a question, here trying to get practical because Christopher, I happen to know some things about your finances being friends. Because one of the things I also coach people to do is to get like multiple sources of income, right? Because to me, it just helps give you flexibility independent of what the economy could be doing because at any point in time the economy could have a seizure, it could have a fit, it could have a cold, whatever. So talk us through how many sources of income you have and maybe a rough percentage breakdown of those income sources.
Yeah, it's these days it's more than it used to be. I mean, primarily it used to be your income from your compensation from work.
Yes.
And that's where most people start, and that's a great place to start. But then you can evolve that, going back to my conversation about saving and
Yes.
investment, to
Yes.
putting money to work in different ways.
Yes.
And by and large, most people start off with market-based instruments,
Sure.
and that's completely important. And we did that. And then over time, we felt like we were we had good exposure to market instruments.
Yes.
And then we then started to make select investments in real estate.
Great.
And we had an interesting perspective to that. One was, places that we weren't just, and there are different ways to do it. There's no one way,
Sure.
right, wrong. You can sort of adopt the view that I want to, buy and sell property.
Yeah.
We didn't have the capacity to do that because we've
Yes.
been moving around so much. Or buy and then remodel, add value, and then maybe put on the market as a
Yes.
rental. You could also do that. We did sort of a little bit of both, where
Yes.
we bought and we bought a couple of places in places that we like to visit because we also kind of balance out this idea of life.
Yes.
So we can visit the places we could genuinely want to live in, but at the same time when we're not there, they're a rental income stream.
Great.
And one of them is more permanently a rental at this point because we live in Netherlands and we're not going to go live.
Yes.
But there are other assets that are still for us quite accessible to us to use,
Yes.
and then put on the market at other times, of the year. And those are choices that you can make.
Fantastic.
So what is going back again to traditional investments, which is equity and debt, by the way.
Yes. Yes.
So again, especially in this market, and especially in my context where my income stream is not stable,
Yes.
we have shifted some amount of investments into debt vehicles so that we
Yes.
get regular, income from that.
Fantastic.
So there's the equity elements which have a different role to be the
Yes.
workhorse that's charging forward. Don't worry about that
Fantastic.
every single day, especially now. You're going to get a heart attack. Volatility
Sure.
is the name of the game.
Yes.
But then there's stability in debt vehicles.
Yes.
We give you, and then there's appreciation built into real estate. And then first, like I said, it's utility because we can
Yes.
keep it. And then thirdly, there's also income. So that's another set of, and then we've sort of been opportunistic with different things.
Yes.
And because of the way the world is going, we've had a really good financial advisor who's led us down paths we normally would not have gone ourselves.
Yes.
The right time into precious minerals.
Yes.
As people are sort of running away from inflation and
Yes.
but it go to gold for whatever reason.
Yes.
Gold still has value, so
Yes.
that works really well for us in the last 5 years. And I would never have thought about cryptocurrency ever.
Sure. Yes.
And our financial guy said, what if? And so we kind of played a little. Again, not betting the entire house.
Sure.
Definitely was very, tailored and surgical, and was very hedged in many ways.
Yes.
So and that actually has done well.
know.
Surprisingly so. You could get greedy and say, "Oh wow, we should have done a lot more." But no, that's not the plan. We're not betting the house. So it's also knowing when to say yes and when to say no, and understanding what real risk is to your entire portfolio.
Yes.
So I think if you come back to your point, I think today we derive most of our operating income
Yes.
as a household
Sure.
from the debt vehicles.
Makes perfect sense because
Yeah.
it gives steady income.
Yes, and the real estate assets are all positive, which is good, but it's sit on
Excellent.
top of not just income but also appreciation,
Yes.
and we get utility. So
Yes.
emotionally and financially, they're doing well. So nothing to worry
Yes.
about. They're not big money makers, but they're taking care of themselves. If you know what I mean.
Excellent. Excellent. And that's what real estate typically does.
Yeah, and then I think the majority of our investments are still in the market-based vehicles,
Sure.
which we've found the right balance in terms of risk and return.
Yeah.
And so we weather the markets,
Yeah.
but we found ourselves always doing better than the market. So if your standard index returns, we always, a couple of points, sometimes
Very good.
a dozen points, 1 or 2 years higher than the average
Wow.
market
Wow.
return. Yeah. Again, just because of the mix. I mean, that goes more technical into the mix that our
Yes.
financial person does. But yeah, so again, we're not talking rich here.
Sure,
There's no
sure.
one on the call, okay, oh my God, no. Trust me, I'm just like you. Again, I'm just trying to be very clear that this is just normal guy like you who's just, being thoughtful and not getting too exuberant
Yeah, exactly.
and not over investing and in the wrong thing, definitely diversifying
Yes,
and then making so that the investments match the lifestyle.
exactly.
So, we live in Europe, so we have to always be flipping money from dollars to euros,
Yes,
you know. And then what I do now, I'm doing a lot more speaking and teaching in Europe.
yes. Okay.
And so generating European based income
Income.
without having to do all this back and forth with currency and all the amounts you can imagine that you lose in the transfer
Yes, I
where
know. I
the
know.
currency
I know.
markets are. So again, that's the current part of the strategy, sort of building sort of this local euro based income stream
Yes,
so that the wire transfers across the ocean minimize over time. And that's, the next focus, quite honestly. So again, so
excellent.
lifestyle focus, lifestyle
Yes,
centric. Everyone is
sure.
going to have a different situation. I think the key is to really be thoughtful about where you are and building the thing that works for you. But knowing that the ultimate goal is security over the long term, not just for 1 or 2 years, over the long term, but knowing that life happens in the interim period and you're also adjusting for that.
Fantastic. And that's really what we help our clients do, making sure they have the income that matches the life they want to pursue, the independent life they want to pursue. That's what we do. So
And
really,
also,
really well said.
yeah, and also I think another point, just 2 points to nail hammer this home. Number one is having a very thoughtful conversation with yourself about what life really means.
Yes,
And for it not to be one that's defined by owning the biggest, baddest things and the most expensive
sure.
things, because that's
Yes,
going to distort this model. You're going to work for a long time.
I agree.
You've got to really manage your expectations and your aspirations to a very reasonable place. And a
Great.
lot of people struggle to do that. That's why I say it so clearly. A lot of people struggle to just level set because everybody wants
Yes,
to keep up with each other and everyone's competing with each other. So that's not the success model here. And I think related to that is also the idea of just making choices about where you want to be frugal and where you
yes,
want to spend money.
absolutely.
It's not one or the other all the time. It's an intentional choice, again, based on your lifestyle, based on what's important. But I think there are lots of ways to deviate from the autopilot model that many of us are in. And it's definitely not, I'm going to work for someone because somehow the golden watch or the retirement money at the end of the day is going to deliver me. I don't think that's going to work. I think that
Yes,
contract has dramatically changed. And we
exactly.
have to be really thoughtful about our careers as well. And it goes back to the idea of courage when you have to make some really big decisions rather than just overinvest in the one employer, hoping that something's going to happen 30 years later when CEO tenures have changed and CEOs are changing every 2 to 3 years. And the company you join could be a very different company 2 years later. You've got to be ready
Yes,
to make sure that you can make the choices that are important and helpful to you to know that that model of invest, have this big pot of gold, and then get 5% of that every year. That model used to work. I don't think it's going to work as well in the future. There
yeah,
has to be something that's independent of institutions, independent of the markets, that is part of the portfolio mix
yes.
that keeps the whole portfolio in a state of integrity.
Christopher, if I could afford it, I would have hired you as a salesman, but I know I can't.
I'm
I
not really
can't
good
do
at that.
that.
I'm not
But
that
very
good.
well said.
I'm not that good.
Very well said. Christopher, I can't believe we've spent this time talking. I mean, the time
Oh,
has
yeah.
just flown by,
Oh,
and
wow.
if we
Sorry.
sit here, we could sit for another hour. But as we try to wrap this up, can you let our clients know if they wanted to, where can they buy the book? Point number one. And then secondly, if they wanted to reach out to you, where could they reach you at?
Yeah, well, the book's available on Amazon. It's easy. Most people in the world have access to that.
Yes.
So in paperback and in a hardcover as well as an ebook, so you can
Yes.
get it there.
Yeah.
Yeah. I notice you have a hardcover. I don't even own a hardcover, so you're doing better than me. Uh, and then in the next few months, we'll have an audiobook. So those of you who have long commutes, you can
Yes.
also get it from, wherever audiobooks are sold. So that's one. I can be reached through my book site. There's
Yes.
a form to reach out to me. And for those of you who are professionals on LinkedIn, I'm very accessible. If you just send me a DM, I will respond. But my book site or the DM both work equally well.
Great.
And if you want to buy the book, Amazon. And if you want an autographed book, very shortly I'll have a paywall on my website so you can get an autographed version directly from me. So I don't have to go through too many vendors to do
Wow.
so.
I
Yeah.
did not know you had that option too. Wow.
Yeah,
That's
no, it's
great.
not up yet, but it will be up in a few days. I've just been late with the Christmas break doing other
Got it.
things.
Got it. Wow. Christopher, again, thank you. This has been very, very, very good. As I said, we could go on and on. I don't think you've answered. I
Yeah.
don't think I got a half of my questions. But
Oh, yeah.
regardless, I think we had a great conversation. I hope the
Okay.
audience also finds it
We can always talk together and
interesting.
I'll talk less. I'll
No, 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 no.
pace faster.
This was great. This was great. But thank you so much for coming on the podcast, Christopher.
Thanks,
Thank you
Evan.
for sharing your insights, and thank you for teaching us about college and certainly moving our lives forward. Deeply appreciated. I hope 2026 is a phenomenal year for you and the family. And thanks once again, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you very much. And Happy New Year to you again and phenomenal year back to you and your guests as well.
Thank you.